Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, and Bob's on the line, but my wife and he are chatting in the other room, so they're just leaving us in here. Hopefully Bob will be with us in just a moment. But I think it's so vitally important that you've seen one of the most beautiful and characteristic plays of how the financial markets are actually manipulated during this past week. And certainly you have to understand that they were able to drop the price of gold and silver. It dropped not because of any market pressures, but because the big banks told the people who run the Commodities Future Trading Commission, that's the CFTC, to raise margin requirements. And of course, people actually have gambled in these markets. They shouldn't, but the foolish people will do foolish things. And of course, if you get into the commodity market, the options market, you can make a small fortune out of a large portion. You are gambling, it's going to go up. You do not have the money to buy. What you need to do, of course, is buy these products. Do not try to outsmart people. You should never be in the commodity market. You should never be in the option market. There's a conspiracy out there to defraud you. And incidentally, I'm going to mention the fact that the conspiracy conference is going to be held on June 4th and June 5th. And here it's going to be in Santa Clara, where it is every year. That's June 4th and June 5th of this year. We'll have a booth there. We won't be speaking. But if you want to go to the conspiracy conference, it'll be held at the Marriott Hotel. The telephone number is 925-449-6844. That's 925-449-6844. There is a conspiracy there. There's a massive conspiracy in the world. There are a lot of different theories about it, because we will be there to give you the straight information, but it's always worthwhile, and there's some excellent speakers who are going to be there talking on many subjects, including finance. But right now, we have with us from the International Forecaster, Bob Chapman. Hi, Bob. How are we doing?
Well, pretty good.
That was an exciting week last week, wasn't it?
Right, it certainly was. And toward the end of the week, we were telling people we thought it was over. And it looks like it might very well have been over. But I think the important thing, and I know you read the Forecaster, and so you're getting a lot of this information. I think that the idea of the government, the CME, which owns COMEX, and the naked shorts such as Morgan and HSBC in silver, they decided we're just going to take the market down. And they got away with it once before. And they're not going to get away with it this time. I just hope that Ron Paul gloms onto this one, because there should be an investigation. It was obvious and blatant what they did. And if they look at the trades, they'll find out who was doing the shorting. And they were hitting the bids on the close, which is illegal. It was terrible what went on.
Well, I'm sure that
I'll get into it more when we come back.
All right, fine. I'm sure J.P. Morgan Chase was there. I'm sure that HSBC, Hong Kong Singapore Bank Corporation was there. All of these Brotherhood of Darkness banks. I said they got the government to do its bidding once again and take gold and silver down. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty. Our guest this afternoon, Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. If you're a regular listener to Radio Liberty, you know that the stock market is manipulated, the commodity markets are manipulated, and last week they manipulated the price of many of the future contracts, including oil and gold and silver, down dramatically. What's amazing is they've come back as quickly as they have, which shows that this was all done by manipulation. It had nothing to do with supply and demand. Basically, of course, the market is supposed to be supply and demand, but of course the commodities trading futures Corporation. That's the CFTC does the bidding. They're a government agency. Certainly they're controlled by the large banks, which were short in the market, and they were going to lose their shirts if the prices kept going up. So they had to drop the market. They dropped it dramatically. And already, as of this today, while gold is back strongly, silver is back strongly. It's up almost, at least $3 an ounce since the end of last week. And I think it's just going to go right back to where it was before. What are your thoughts, Bob? Where are we heading? And do you think the American people are going to begin to realize that everything is manipulated, including our reality?
Well, I think if we continue to do what we're doing for a few more years on radio and with what goes on the Internet, I think a good portion of the world is going to know what's going on. And it'll give us an opportunity to expose what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they hope the outcome is. And we have to have a formula for putting them all in jail. And it's as simple as that. Gold on Friday was up $9.60. Today it was up $22. Silver was up 96 cents on Friday and $2.56 today. So the market looks like it may have bottomed. We'll know if they come in and hit the bids. And they've been trying to do that, but it hasn't done them any good. I got a report out of the exchange, which is the COMEX, that the big buyers on the long side are traders. Interesting. Last week, up until Tuesday, the naked shorts hadn't covered anything. And so what we saw was an exercise in brute power. They're telling us we can do anything we want. There are no rules. The only rules that there are the ones that we make.
Hold that thought, because it's all crooked, ladies and gentlemen. It's all crooked here. Well, this is Dr. Stam. Sydney Bob Chapman has been pointing out that there are rules that rule our stock exchanges, rules that rule the commodity exchanges, and the people who are in control are simply manipulating everything, and they don't abide by the rules. The commodity finance, the CFTC, the Commodity Finance Trading Corporation, is certainly operating at the behest and under the direct instruction of the major banks who've been shorting gold and silver to keep the prices down. Why? Because they know if the prices go up, it will reflect the fact that people are losing confidence in the phony, baloney monopoly money put out by the Federal Reserve System. You have to have something behind your money. This has been proven through thousands of years of experience. Everything going on today has been tried at one time or another before, and it has always failed. But the way the system is set up, they get rich, and the average person gets impoverished, and what they're going to do is destroy the value of our currency and impoverish our people. And Bob brought that out beautifully in the latest forecast. As you pick up the story, Bob, I thought that your beginning comments there in this forecast that just came out on Saturday were classic. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. So what has happened is the CME, which controls the COMEX, they increased margin requirements for those who are on margin because they borrow money to buy their positions. And the margin was about $9,500. They jacked it up to $21,600, which is about 5 times more money to come up with. On the other hand, working hand in glove in this conspiracy with the CME and the U.S. government and Morgan and HSBC and Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and Deutsche Bank and on, these big players in the commodity market, these houses like Morgan Stanley and the rest of them, they doubled the increases that were put in place by CME. So it wasn't $21,600 today. to do a contract. It was 40 to 42,000. Now, what they attempted to do and were successful at doing is just arbitrarily blowing all the small and medium-sized players out of the market. They gave them a margin call. They didn't have time to react to it. Most of them didn't. We know a few that did, but the point is this. It was all contrived. It was a total manipulation. Now, what's happened in the market now is when you spike down from $49 to $32, you spike back up $5 or $6. We're seeing that. We had an intraday of a minus 32, and today we were 37.85, exactly as I predicted. What's going to happen from here? I don't know. It could set back a little, but I think it's going higher. And I'll tell you why. All of the people who are in the market are out, and they may very well come back in with more money, but more importantly, there's nobody in front of you to sell. These people at the CME and at these brokerage houses and in government, they can't think that far ahead. I mean, they've never heard of chess in their life, or at least if they play it, they can't apply it to anything else. And so we're going to see a continued rally here. And if we rally back up to 49 again, and the margins are still the same, if they pull that again, there's going to be fire and brimstone. And they know it. So they blew their one chance. And I don't see any chance of taking it below 30, 32. And so people who are in the market, you hold on. People who are in the market and you want to buy some more, do it. People who have never been in that market and want to do it, do it.
But do not get into that market on margin or try to borrow money to do it. You've got to have the money yourself. You do it with borrowed money, especially with margin money. Why, of course, they can wipe you out. I mean, make sure that you can actually take physical delivery. Even you borrow money and take physical delivery, but you have to be able to take physical delivery because you try to play their game by their rules. The rules are set up like this. We win, you lose, and you don't want to be in a game like that. Go ahead.
So if you want to be a buyer, do so. There's no overhead resistance at all because it's all been wiped out. And I don't think these people dare try this trick again at $50 again because Congress will come down on them like a ton of bricks. And so they made a mistake. They did it quick. They spiked it. Stupid. And now we have traders, professionals, in on the long side of the market because they know that. And I wouldn't know it if I hadn't been doing this for 52 years. And that's why my calls are always straight on. I did it. I was on the firing line for 29 years. So I know. So anyway, that's where I think it's going. Now, there's another development that came last night out of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Mercantile Exchange is starting on the 18th. A new 1 kilo gold contract, that's 32 ounces. And this move by the Chinese is very important because it's going to end the COMEX monopoly. They're not going to be able to get away with what they were doing before, like 5 consecutive margin hikes in 9 days. Also, what pros have been doing, which is illegal, in the COMEX is, and it's not only gold and silver, it's other futures as well. They're perpetually short. And what they do is they come in toward the end of the day and they get short. They just attack, trying to knock the price down. And they do it all the time. And it happens in the stocks as well. Not just gold and silver stocks, but others. And so that is going to come to a halt because the market trades spot. It's over at 130. At 5 o'clock, and this is Eastern time, you have the cessation of the nearby contracts. In this case, June gold, July silver. That is about, there's an access market is what it's called, that bridges between that time zone and Hong Kong. And when that happens, the next trade is in Hong Kong. So they can't get away with it anymore. So this is a very, very important announcement. I don't know of anybody else that has released it except one other party. And we're going to enter a new era in gold and silver, especially in the futures market. And they're not going to be able to as easily pull that off again. I feel bad for the people who are blown out. And if you were in that market and you were blown out, go long. They're not going to be able to stop this thing. And JPM and HSBC did not cover anything. It was they were trying to show you how illegal they can be and how powerful they can be. It was an exercise in power because they didn't cover. Now, when they get back up to 50 again, they get the same problem. Do you think they're going to be able to raise margin 5 times again? I don't think so. So that's where that thing lies. They made a tremendous mistake, and they're going to pay for it.
Well, I certainly hope so, because, of course, basically what we see is a situation where this government agency, the CFTC, is totally subservient to the banks. But then, ladies and gentlemen, so is the President of the United States. I mean, who does he pick as his chief of staff? Why, Mr. William Daley comes from J.P. Morgan Chase, and the head of his certainly his advisors, economic advisors, called Goldman Sachs. They were the largest financiers in the world. Were the ones who put Barack Obama in power. Now, of course, he's got to, of course, rail against it, but it's all showbiz, it's political theater, but those who pay the piper call the tune. And basically, the banks were the biggest financial contributor, not only to Barack Obama, but to the congressmen and the senatorial races. I mean, and their lobbyists and the people affiliated who work for the banks. They direct the cause, certainly, of course, of our government, and they're making loads of money as the average individual is being really hurt very seriously as the economy collapses. And look at those bonuses on Wall Street. I believe in the free enterprise system. This is not free enterprise. This is corporate fascism, where the government supports the banks and the banks control the government. Go ahead, Bob.
You left out the most important part.
All right, fine. But go ahead.
William Daley is from the Chicago Daily crime family.
You're absolutely right. In fact, his brother is the current mayor, and of course, Rahm Emanuel, who is the previous chief of staff, now is going to replace the current mayor, who's a Daley, with Rahm Emanuel, who comes from the White House, and the man who takes his place is William Daley from the same crime family and J.P. Morgan Chase. But of course, the crime families and the banks interlocked, and they always have. People don't understand there is a brotherhood of darkness, a brotherhood of power that runs things behind the scenes, and very few people have any idea how this all fits together. That's why you need to read my book. We'll be back in a moment. Bob, you go right ahead.
Well, I think we've covered the silver and gold situation for the past 10 days, and probably where it's going to go. And it looks like it's upward. I think we have to shift focus, and we have to go over to a place called Greece. On the 13th of the month, 4 days from now, there's going to be a bill called in the Greek House I can't pronounce it, so I won't even attempt to, but you know what I mean. And you probably have seen my letters, which I received from subscribers in Greece, many of whom are really connected people. And in Greece, that is not unusual because these people, they live there for centuries, and many people live next door to each other for 5 or 10 or 20 generations. And so they tell me that the vote's coming and Papandreou is going to lose the vote. The reason why is because his own party doesn't even want to go along with it, because if they vote for the collateralization of debt and debt wins, they'll never be in public office again. Because the Greek people, they all know what's going on because of my broadcasts over there and what's in the newspapers, the backing for the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, who uses the International Forecaster as his advisor. I just email back and forth to him. And so they know. And Stamos, who runs the other party, he knows. And he's been going all over Greece telling everybody, look, they want to give away our islands, our mineral rights, our airports, our airline, all the seaports as collateral, along with 263 airfields. The mineral rights, they know that they've already got oil offshore, that they've never drilled it.
Now, could you explain to our listeners what this collateralization means? Basically, you're talking about the fact that they owe the banks a great deal of money, and the banks want that as security for their loans. If we're going to lend you more money, here's what we want in return. And if they do, the people of Greece will be impoverished for the next several generations.
That's right. That's I've told them that. And so it's going to be defeated. But the very temerity of the bankers to demand, the railroad, the bus service, the electric company, the waste collection, everything you can think of, they want it. Why don't they just take all the Greeks and ship them to Italy or something? That's really what this boils down to. So it's not going to happen. And the Greeks are talking about withdrawing from the euro, and Germany's racing around trying to save their loans. They're the biggest lender. And of course the banks are frantic. And rightly they should be. They should have never made the loans in the first place, and they created the money out of thin air. And so they deserve to lose their money.
Hold that thought, Bob. We'll be back here in just a moment here. Well, Dr. Stan, and Chris, something very important is going to be happening in a few days in Greece. And Bob has been saying for some time that Greece is, in all probability, going to drop out of the European currency. By so doing, they'll have to drop out of the European Union. If they do, the very structure of the European Union will be endangered. And of course, the Greeks are saying, or at least the European Union is saying, you can't do it. You don't have the right to. You can't drop out of the European currency. You can't drop out of the European Union. You've lost your right to do that. The Greeks are saying, what do you mean? We never actually gave you permission to say that we had to stay in this. This was voluntary. We came in voluntarily. The people on the other side are frantic. And, of course, Bob has been on the radio over there repeatedly and in contact with key people saying, you've got to drop out. You've got to just tell the banks, look, you never should have made the loans. You did it with money you created out of nothing. You've had the audacity to charge us interest on money you created out of nothing. And we're not going to pay you back. And I think at one time the Greeks actually offered to pay the bank something, what was it, 50 cents on the dollar? They turned them down. What was that all about?
A debt settlement. And so what happened, they turned them down, and I bet now they wish they hadn't. Because the Greeks might walk away from the whole thing. And there's nothing they can do to them. What are they going to do, invade them? They have no choice. And if you remember, the Greeks are very tough people. when Adolf Hitler went into Greece, he delayed the invasion of Crete by 3 months, the Greeks did. They fought them hand to hand all the way down the peninsula. And finally, German numbers and superior equipment and training overwhelmed the Greeks. But it really blew a big hole in Hitler's timetable. And these people are not going to give up. They know the truth now, because we've told them the truth. And they know what to do, and they're going to do it.
And basically, of course, the people in Iceland have said, we're not going to bail out the bankers, you know. The bankers made these problems. We're not going to just give up our freedom and our wealth to bail out the bankers. The people in Ireland are saying very much the same thing, aren't they, Bob?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's correct.
Basically,
and I hope they and Portugal both walk.
Right.
And if they do, Spain is going to be in a heap of hurt. And they'll go. They'll have to. You know, you don't know the story behind modern Spain. Ever since it was during the 1970s. And what they did was they get rid of Francisco Franco. He died. And they changed the government. And ever since then, it's been almost impossible to do business in Spain. 50,000 people from Europe, all over Europe, bought houses in Spain. And they all lost them. Because either the government said the house was built on our property and we don't want you to be there, so get out of here. Or the builders didn't own the property that they built on, supposedly. And there's a woman in England who's one of our subscribers, and you see her letter in Wednesday's issue, under Europe, I think it is, from a subscriber. And she's been trying to get the money back for the people who bought and paid for homes or entered into a contract to do so. That's the state of business in Spain today. It's terrible. On top of that, the big banks in Spain are broke. Santander is one of the biggest banks. Who owns Santander? The Alpha Group. Who owns the Alpha Group? Lord Rothschild, the Queen of England, and the Queen of Holland. Real, wonderful people. If you like the black nobility, of course. And the seat of the Brotherhood of Darkness, the Illuminati. So that's what's going on in Spain. The banks are all broke. They get gazillions of houses they don't know what to do with. And all the people who came to invest, to have a nice place to go to in the wintertime, get screwed out of their money.
And
that's a story you never hear.
But of course, this all ties into how the banks create money out of nothing. And after all, it's wonderful to be able to borrow money for nothing and then lend it out at 5%, 8%. This is what they're doing in the United States. They're borrowing money from the Fed for nothing, and then they're investing it in T-bills at the 2.5%, 3%. That's pretty good. But who's funding it? We are, with our future, and certainly with the future enslavement of the American people. The banking industry is totally fraudulent. Andrew Jackson said it. Of course, repeatedly, people have tried to warn the American people, and of course now I think some are beginning to understand. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and our guest, of course, Bob Chapman. I was reading your latest forecaster, and I think it was there that I read that some banks were lending was up to 70 to 1, and some were lending 60 to 1. Whereabouts is that?
Well, it's from one of the past issues.
Right. I mean,
but they've got that way down to 40 to 1 now. And they're allowed to keep it there because they are using that basis of leverage because they're creating the inside information. They don't get inside information. They don't work on inside information. They create it. And if you can understand that, that means anything that they do in the financial world is a lock. What is a lock? It means you can't lose. And that is what's going on.
And the whole thing is based upon lending money you don't have. In other words, you have $1 and you lend that same dollar out to 70 different people or 60 different people. You don't lend them the money, you lend them the credit. And that's wonderful. And then you get interest from each one of those people. But what happens if you lose that $1 you've got in deposit? Then you're in real trouble. And that's what's happening all across America. That's why so many banks are insolvent, because they've lost the dollars upon which all this credit was based. Go right ahead, Bob.
And so banks in the United States and in England and Ireland and in the Eurozone and in Europe, the European Union, they're going to lose it all. Sooner or later. All they're doing is buying time. And what they'll do, as we discussed before here on the program, they're going to have another war. And I believe it's already begun. When they went into Libya, and the Chinese had to pull out all their personnel, and they can't get any of the oil that they contracted for. And in Syria, the Russians have a naval base. If there's a change in power, the Russians will get kicked out. I don't think they're too happy about that. So the United States, through the people who they control, have started all this stuff. I mean, in Libya, it's so obvious. The man that runs the so-called rebel army.
Hold that thought. No, this is Dr. Stan. This is certainly Bob Chapman saying that the banks certainly are all insolvent. Why? Well, they have $1. They'll lend it out 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times, 60 times, even up to 70 times. That $1 they lend out over and over. They lend out the credit. They create the credit based upon that $1. But what happens when you lose the dollar? Now you've got $70 out there without anything behind it. And banks all over the world are insolvent. So what do you do under the circumstances? You start a war. We've started the war, as Bob points out. Why are we suddenly backing the rebels in Libya? Who are they? They're certainly an organization we put together. The gentleman who's leading this, his name is Haftar. He was living in Washington, D.C. under the auspices of the CIA. We sent him over there to command this group of rebels. There's only about 1,000 of them. We're financing them. We're seizing Gaddafi's money from banks here in Europe and the United States to use to finance the rebels to defeat Gaddafi. But in the process, of course, what we've done is, of course, we've seized the area that the Chinese had invested in Libya. They had about 30,000 people there. They had about 50 drilling projects to get oil. And so Chinese had invested their money there. And, of course, we've put the pressure on. The Chinese had to pull their 29,000 of their 30,000 people out. Certainly Russia had strong holdings in Syria. They were building a naval base there. Well, actually, we've stirred up this whole the rebel movement in Syria, the revolutionary movement in Syria, to, of course, drive Russia out. What we are doing is building the foundation for both Russia and China to want to go to war with the United States, because we're destroying their industrial and military base. And so I think that Bob's point is well made. We're well on the way to World War III, and the average American has never even heard that the Chinese were heavily invested in Libya, and they were forced to pull out 29,000 of their people, and they stand to lose certainly hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars from their Libyan investments by a revolution that they know was started by the United States. The same thing is true in Syria today, and all of these revolutions are certainly backed by our intelligence agencies and working in conjunction with British intelligence. And anybody doubts that is only to read the speech given by Lord James on the 1st of November. You can get it on the Internet by putting in Lord James, Belfast Telegraph, finance terrorism, and see how he talks about funneling billions of dollars to the terrorists, including the terrorists in North Africa, at the behest of the Bank of England. That's Lord James. Well, Bob, before we go on, I want you to get out your information, how people get in touch with you, and get the International Forecaster so they can keep abreast of what's going on. And then, if you're out there and you have a question for Bob, and believe me, ladies and gentlemen, you must be on top of what's going to happen, because most people are going to get wiped out before this is over. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. If Greece actually pulls out of the European currency this coming week, it will shape the very foundation of the European Union. This is one of the most important weeks you've ever lived through. Bob, go ahead, get out the information on how people can subscribe to the International Forecaster. They need the information if they're going to survive at this time. Go right ahead.
The International Forecaster is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. We publish on Wednesdays and Saturdays, usually runs around 40 pages each time, and we have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And anything that you need to know every week is in that publication. You can get a free introductory copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. International, FORECASTER.com, or to www.intforecaster.com, intforecaster.com. If you have questions, and we answer everyone, or if you'd like a copy, or if you'd like our latest releases on gold and silver shares, email us at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com, Bob at intforecaster.com, and for those of you who want to call toll-free, that number is 800-375-4188, 800-375-4188.
All right, fine. Let's go to Bob, who's calling us from Spokane, Washington. Let's see, as soon as you get him passed through, I will be glad to take his call. But if you're out there in the listening audience, you have a question for Bob, 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. John, do you have a question for our guest?
Yes, Bob. The question I have is, listening to you, I got a good feel of like what the Americans are about to face and are currently facing, and what the European governments have been facing and what they will face. What, with all this unrolling, what are the Europeans about to face as compared to like what we're about to face? What's it going to be like for them?
Well, I think you can say it's equally as bad. It's hard to say one is worse than the other. The real basket case here is England. I mean, they're hopeless. And of course, you have Greece, Ireland, Portugal, and probably Spain. In the United States, you have municipalities, states, federal government, and even individuals and corporations that got financial problems. And, you know, I look at the news coming through today, and Bank of America is going to start charging 30% on credit cards. I mean, they must be insane, because the amount of credit being used is being reduced because people are paying off their bills. But the point is that the second half of the year is going to be a nightmare. You've got refunding in Europe and the U.S., which is mega. And you've got the Europeans for the European Central Bank in the Eurozone 17 of the 27 countries in the EU, they have raised interest rates. And they were supposed to do it again in June, and now Trichet is backing off on that, saying, well, I don't know whether we ought to do that or not. And the reason why is Germany's going great guns. Austria, the Netherlands, and France are doing okay. The rest of them, they're down the toilet. It's as simple as that. So you have, and I talked about this and the timing last May, then again at the beginning of the year. And what's going to happen is they're all going to semi-implode at the same time. And that is the worst possible thing that can happen. And they all have to finance. They get heavy-duty financing coming up. And, try and sell bonds in some of these countries to the public or to institutional investors. Forget it. And so this Greek thing is going to turn things around. And if they default or partially default and leave the euro, the other sick players will do the same thing. And one of the strengths of the euro is that there's no tariffs between countries. Well, what the Greeks will do is they'll come back with the drachma, and they'll make it worth about 50% of what the euro's worth. And then they'll be able to compete. Most of their exports are farm goods and fish and things like that. But the real strong suit is tourism. And if you can go to Greece for half the price you can go to Italy for a vacation, I think you're going to go to Greece. And so I think they'll do fine. Ireland is in the same boat. The previous government sold out the country and guaranteed the bankers' debts. The housing market's upside down, to say the very least, worse than it is in the United States right now. They're talking maybe doing some rescheduling for them because they know the people walked away from. The new party that came into power really didn't do much different than the other gang that was in there. I mean, I think they're all afraid. They want Ireland to get rid of their low corporate tax rates. And those low corporate tax rates, they attract a number of foreign companies because of the low rates. And they put a lot of people to work. And the Europeans, under these circumstances, are demanding that they increase their rates up to what the rates are in Europe. If they do that, they're not going to be able to compete. And so I think the best thing for Ireland to do, if they can get leadership who will do it, is walk away from the debt. And say, no, we're going back to the punt. We're going to do what the Greeks did. We don't need you people. Adios.
Well, why do you think is England in such a bad straits? I mean, why? You said they're just a basket case, but what happened in England that they have so many problems? Is it they have such great debts, or what is it?
They have great debts, but the banks are totally insolvent. So what the banks did is they get the government to bail them out. Who's the government? The people. So you get about 10 insolvent institutions, major ones, like the Bank of Scotland and others, which incidentally is owned by the royal family. And there's no way out. They dumped it all in the public. And everything that can go wrong went wrong. The real estate market collapsed before ours did. Unemployment is very high. Costs are skyrocketing. Official inflation is 5.2%. Real inflation is over 12%. They don't tell you about that. They're even ahead of the U.S., which is 10%. It'll be 18 by the end of the year, but I think England will probably be maybe, I said 14 by the end of the year, maybe 16%, maybe more. It's crazy. There's no way the system can survive the way it is. And the only thing that's going to solve it is we have to have a government in the United States that's going to say, no, Ron Paul is there, and he says, we ain't going to do that anymore. This is what we're going to do. We're going to bite the bullet, and the bankers are going to eat it. They're going to get nothing to go out of business. We could care less. And that's where it's got to stop. And if they don't start at that level, forget it. The further we go on, the worse it gets. And the bankers know that. They want to bring the system down and have their third world war. And that third world war will be a cover for all of the chaos that they've caused economically and financially, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
Okay, does that answer your question, Michael?
John, yeah, it does. Very good. One other question. Now, we know that their plan and the reason they're doing all this is to create a huge crisis so that they can come in with the one world currency, et cetera, et cetera. Is in the process of creating this chaos, is it out of their control right now? In other words, it's not a controlled demolition. It's actually getting out of control. Do you think at this point in time they're starting to panic, or do you think they still think it's under control?
I think it is under control. But they move from crisis to crisis. It just gets worse and worse. The comment not too long ago by Zbigniew Brzezinski was that these people they're breathing down our collar, down our neck, and you've got to do something about it. He's talking to other Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateralists and Bilderbergers. And even Henry Kissinger is in a morose mood because he can't make anything work either. What they've done in the Middle East has not worked the way they wanted it to. 3, George Soros leads the band for the real criminal element within the Illuminati. And he's telling everybody everything's going to be okay. I sold my silver position. It was probably him that's been buying the last few days. I mean, this guy is such a skunk that I could spend an hour telling you about him.
And that's the oldest trick in the world. You know, you start selling, everybody else panics and sell, and then you step in and buy again. That's what the Rothschilds did at the time of the Battle of Waterloo. That's where they got their great fortune. Hey, we're going to have to go. Let you go, John.
Thanks, guys.
Let's go quickly to John calling from Spokane. John, do you have a quick question for our guest?
Hey, this is Michael.
I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, just in regard to the currency devaluation that I heard in this late summer, is that still going to happen? And if it is going to happen, if someone has a little bit of gold and silver, should they wait to sell it after the currency devaluation? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be in a hurry to sell any gold and silver. We don't know where this thing's going, and it could get pretty nasty. So to answer your question, you should go long and you stay long. If you subscribe to the International Forecaster, you have a shot at getting out at the top. If you have to get out, you know, there may be nothing to go to. I mean, why would you want to get rid of gold and silver if they had some crummy dollar or other crummy currencies, except what you need to live on? Why would you want to do that? Would you want to buy houses or buildings that might not appreciate for 30 or 40 years? I don't think so. You want to go in a bond market where the interest rates are rising and bonds are falling? I don't think so. Do you want to go in a stock market that drops from 12,800 to 2,800? I don't think so. So don't worry about selling. Worry about buying.
Yes, sir.
I think that's very, very good advice. Anything else, Michael?
No, thank you.
God bless you. And certainly, we live in very, very uncertain times. You're going to need guidance through this, and I think Bob's been at this for about as long, even a little longer than I have. I think that his advice is absolutely correct. I mean, they said currencies are worth the paper they're written on. Well, they're not even worth the paper they're written on. But, of course, if they convince you of that, it's all built upon trust. People borrowing money and paying it back. Countries borrowing money and pay it back. But what happens when countries borrow money and they can't pay it back or they won't pay it back? And then the whole system falls apart. Oh, Bob, let's go ahead and get your website out, information on how people can get the International Forecaster.
Well, the Forecaster, you can get a free copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. Forecaster is spelled FORECASTER.com. And you can also email us to get a copy or questions answered or our latest releases in gold and silver shares. And that address is bob@intforecaster.com. That's bob@intforecaster.com. And you can also call 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188 if you want a copy.
All right, fine. Well, what are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, holding a gun to the Greeks' heads is not a very good idea. The Greeks are like the Italians. They're street fighters. And the Europeans are trying to do just that. And it's a terrible mistake. The reason why is the Europeans are in a corner. They're the lenders, and they want Greece to commit themselves, number one, to collateralization of the debt, which is impossible, and number two, they want to keep them in bondage for another 50 years. And they know they probably won't pay the debt back, so they want to own Greece. And the heck with the Greeks. It's not going to work. And the people in Germany and Finland are howling. They don't want to lend any more money. Blame them. In fact, they don't even want to be in the European Union, nor do they want to be in the Eurozone, nor do they want to have the Euro. They don't like it. Never liked it. I mean, we have a lot of subscribers all over Europe, lots of them. And they all say the same thing. So that's the way that whole thing is headed. And it's not going to be good. And you'll hear them, well, we got to come back and make another deal. Another thing, too, that disturbed, say, 23, 24 members of the European Union, they all went to a meeting here the other day, and behind their back, the Germans and others were having secret meetings. And they call them undisclosed. I couldn't believe it. Another euphemism. And they were plotting on how to last through the Greeks. And the Greeks are saying, hey, we don't care.
Hold that thought. Well, Bob is just saying that things are very, very uncertain over in Europe. The people of Europe don't want to be in the European currency, and they don't want to be in the European zone. Their leaders do, and there's tremendous unrest over there, especially in some countries like Germany, where both political parties are controlled by the same people. In fact, this is all centered here in the United States. The globalist dream of the world government, we're pushing the European Union, we're pushing the European currency, and the people over there are sick and tired of it, and they recognize the fact that somebody's working behind the scenes, the Brotherhood of Darkness. Well, then if you want to get hold of Bob and get a copy of the International Forecaster and subscribe, the number is 800-375-4188, 800-375-4188. Bob, we'll talk to you this evening.
I will be there, and thank you all for listening.
God bless. Okay, fine. Well, Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, and we're going to be talking about some of the most momentous occurrences during your lifetime. Because the whole financial system, not only of the United States, but the whole world is changing and changing dramatically. I mean, suddenly it was this last week when Greece was beginning to talk about defaulting on its debt. debt, about leaving the European Union, leaving the European currency. This would, of course, create a terrible, terrible conflict as far as Europe is concerned and threaten the very existence of the European Union, which would be a great thing because, of course, this is actually the reconstitution of ancient Babylon. In fact, if you were to go to actually Strasbourg today, you would see a replica of the incomplete Tower of Babel. This is all simply what Jonathan Gray was talking about the other evening, the fulfillment of Nimrod's prophecy, his goal, the prototype of the Antichrist, to bring the Antichrist kingdom to earth. And these people who were involved know exactly what they're doing, and they scoff at because we're so foolish. We don't understand, but the major driving force behind the European Union and the stepping stone towards uniting the world is the organization here in the United States. Headquarters at 5080 68th Street in New York City, the Council on Foreign Relations, which was formed in 1921, and you'll find this on pages 951 and 52 of Professor Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope, because he had a chance of going through the secret files of the secret societies. Basically, Professor Quigley points out that the Council on Foreign Relations was formed in 1921 to be a front for J.P. Morgan and the Round Table, which of course was a front for the secret society dedicated to bringing about a world government. We've got Bob Chapman on the line. Hi, Bob Chapman. How are you doing?
Well, pretty good. I was just checking out my secret society.
Well, there are lots of secret societies, but certainly the whole idea is to bring about a world government. And, of course, the fact that you've been telling us for some time that Greece might very well default on its debt, might pull out of the European Union, and if that should happen, that would certainly put a crimp in the globalist plans for the world government, wouldn't it?
It certainly would, and it's very possible, and it could be followed by Ireland and Portugal and maybe even Spain. And then the question arises as well, how would that affect the euro? And these nations might decide to go back to their currencies that they used before, and probably come back with currencies worth about 50% less than what they have now. And that would give them a big advantage, having a cheap currency.
Well, we've been reading that certainly Finland, the elections in Finland, with the new party come in, and they're saying we don't want to go along with bailing out Portugal and Greece, and this is another factor too. So things are changing and changing very rapidly. The best thing that could happen, of course, is for the European currency, the European Union would fall apart. That would give them an economic advantage over the United States, but the dollar is going to fall anyway. We're in very real problems. Anyway, our guest this evening is Bob Chapman, the International Forecaster, and we're going to be back here in just a moment as we begin discussing certainly the progressive destruction of the American economy. Bob, you go right ahead. You pick up the story and I'll be quiet here.
Well, I don't think Europeans quite understand the gravity of what's going on. But the Americans don't understand any of it, and I think the people in the rest of the world don't either. I think businessmen and perhaps those in the markets understand or get somewhat of a grasp of the trouble that the euro and all of Europe is in, and I think what's going to happen in all probability, and this is a big mistake on the part of the European banks and the countries, and they are demanding collateralization of former and future loans, and they want the Greek government to collateralize these loans with just about everything they've got. And, I mean, I don't even know how you can ask a country to do something like that. And you know, what are the Greeks going to do by being pushed to the wall like that? I mean, you want to antagonize somebody, that's what you do. And it just shows you the brazenness and the arrogance of people, particularly these bankers. And I think they're going to turn down anything that is proposed. I'll be very surprised if they'll do a partial bankruptcy. And I think they're just going to walk away. The President, George Papandreou, he's a Marxist. His father, Andres, was a Marxist.
Now, Papandreou is the Prime Minister of Greece. He's a Bilderberger. He's certainly a part of the Illuminati. But, of course, he's really over a barrel here. He may very well lose all of his power, because certainly the political parties over there in Greece are furious. They don't want to suddenly in-debt the people for the next 50 years and turn over all the wealth of Greece to the international financiers who created the problem. And the Greek people are really up in arms. Go right ahead, Bob.
They are, and the opposition leader, Mr. Stamos, has been, for the last 3 weeks, going all over the country.
Okay, hold that. We'll be back in just a moment here with Bob Chapman. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Bob is just saying that the opposition leader in Greece, who, of course, is well acquainted with what's going on. Do you know this gentleman at all, this gentleman who's leading the opposition in Greece?
No.
All right, fine.
No, I don't. I just know who he is, and he and a couple of other representatives hell, going to town and telling everybody, look, this is what these people are trying to do to us.
And basically what they want to do is take away their islands. They want to take away the infrastructure. They want them to put up their airports, their trains, everything they have as collateral to the banks. The banks who created the loans that got them into this problem. And now they simply want to impoverish the people. The bank's going to end up owning Greece, and the Greek people will simply be there paying off the debts. And as they learn about this, they're really getting pretty angry. At least I hope they are.
Well, the loans should have never been made in the first place. They were imprudent, whether they were made by sovereign countries such as Germany, France, Holland, Austria, who are the better situated countries. As a matter of fact, Germany is doing quite well, whereas the other, quote, healthy countries are just sliding by, and the rest of the players aren't doing very well. And so a proposal like this is just something they should have never done. And the Greeks are very tough people. As I pointed out before in the earlier show, they delayed the Germans for 3 months in Greece in their attack on Crete, and they forced them to have to jump there airborne into Crete, and nobody thought they could do it. I mean, these people didn't know anything about guns and how to use them or anything else, nor had they been trained. Of course, ultimately, they were beaten by an overwhelming, well-trained force with excellent weapons. But that's the kind of people you're dealing with. And they live in their country for generations and generations. And they all know each other. Not everybody, but lots of people know each other. And so, wrong thing. And, you know, you would have thought they would have consulted people who specialized in the psychiatry of people, so to speak. But I guess they didn't do that. And so, I think it can happen, and the Irish people have been sold out terribly by their leadership, and the new leadership doesn't seem to be a heck of a lot better than the last group. And what they've done a couple of years ago, instead of the banks, the government will stand behind your debt. Now, why would they do such a thing? I mean, the banks made all the wrong decisions. They lost the money. This is internally in Ireland. And the government agrees to pay off all the debt.
I think people have to understand everything is based upon debt. I mean, the banks create money out of nothing. They have a dollar and they can lend out a credit based upon that dollar, $10, $20, $50, $60, sometimes even as many as $70 in credit based upon that $1 in debt. That $1 they have on deposit. But eventually this whole thing collapses as debt contracts and people can't pay all the money. You can live great as long as there's ready money available. The party's great and everybody's doing fine. And eventually the debt gets to be overwhelming. Everybody's doing so well. And then the debt begins to implode. And then the banks want the people to bail them out, and yet they never should have made the loans in the first place. That's why the old saying, was said by William McChesney Martin, the purpose of the central bankers is to take away the punch bowl just when the party gets interesting. Well, they didn't take away the punch bowl. They kept adding whiskey and rum and rye and vodka to the punch bowl, and everybody was having a great old time. And they destroyed the economy, and this is what's happening. And now they're taking away the punch bowl, and of course the people have nothing at all to drink and nothing to eat and no hope. And they're going to lose their homes, they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose their savings, they're going to lose their cars. And of course the bankers want the people to bail out the bankers that created the problem in the first place. Go ahead, Bob.
And that is perennially the attitude. And it's about time it stopped. You and I have been talking about the Federal Reserve, which is the privately owned entity here in the United States, for over 50 years, and giving out pamphlets 50 and 30 and 40 years ago, and trying to convince people that this was the problem. It's only in the last 15 years or so that we've been able to penetrate the peoples of the world through talk radio and the Internet. And quite frankly, the Brotherhood of Darkness never should have created the Internet, because it's come back to haunt them. But anyway, people are learning. That's good. Will we have enough time? Maybe. It's going to take, probably, unless something really unusual happens, probably 2 or 3 years for this thing to wind down. And the question always is, are we going to have a war and a world war? And the chances are probably that we will.
But the only trouble is, when you get into a war, you're never absolutely certain how it's going to end. There's only one worse thing than having a war, with all the horror and devastation and slaughter that goes with it, and that's to lose a war. Could America lose the next war? Well, actually, we've got a nuclear-armed Pakistan. That'll mean a nuclear arm, because we've been giving them the money all along so they could build the weapons for it. We're building the best enemy money could buy. Of course, we've done the same thing with China and Russia and India. They all have nuclear weapons. And, of course, this next war could be far different. Or maybe those oceans aren't wide enough to protect us as they have in the past. And what would simply one nuclear weapon in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles do? Go right ahead, Bob.
Well, I think that's a distinct possibility. If they have a war and nuclear weapons are used, the world could become uninhabitable. And will they use them? I don't know. And all to cover up the mistakes and the machinations of these bankers and others, politicians, academians, and so on. And you have to be completely out of your mind to do these things. And it's nothing new. Go backwards. We've had Korea and Vietnam, the Second World War, the First World War, and hundreds of wars in between. And usually the bankers are sitting on both sides, financing both sides, hoping that it won't devour them too. And a very, very dangerous game. And I think they've come to a juncture here that has never existed before. And that is, the intelligence of the people has been awakened by the truth as to who's doing it, why they're doing it, and what the end game is here. And that's one of the reasons the people in Greece are doing what they're doing, because we've been on the radio and television and in the newspapers over there telling them, look, don't pay him back. I mean, Max Kaiser is over there right now driving them crazy, just like I and Alex Jones have in the past. And they're not going to get away. They're not going to win this thing.
And actually, Bob has been on both radio and television over in Greece, and his information is circulating widely in Greece, explaining about how the bankers create credit out of nothing, and then they expect to be paid back with interest. And, of course, the people, do they really want to give up their freedom for the next 50 years and work for the bankers? I think there's a growing resistance, certainly throughout Europe and many parts of the world. They're learning about the banking system, and even some people in America, because of the work of Ron Paul and a few others, are beginning to understand that we have a fraudulent banking system. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Barack Obama is simply an agent of the bankers. I mean, he's got a new chief of staff. Who is he? His name is William Daley. And where did he come from? Well, it came from, of course, the crime family that been running Chicago for a long time. That's the Daley family. But also he came from J.P. Morgan Chase, and so that head of the Council of Economic Advisors came from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs was one of the largest financiers of the Obama administration, Obama campaign. But we can't let the American people know that. Oh, he's got to rail against the bankers. It's all political theater. I mean, they determine his policies, and Barack does what he's told to do. And so the largest contributors to the financial campaigns of all of our elected representatives is the banking industry. We have the finest legislators and executive that money could buy. Go right ahead, Bob.
And they've captured about 95% of them. And until we bring an end to many of the practices, and I don't know how we're going to do that, but we have to, such as lobbying and campaign contributions. It's very difficult because that same Congress has to vote them out, so to speak. And I don't think they're going to be willing to do that.
He who pays the piper calls the tune. And when people are giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars to get reelected, you want to get reelected. And you know very well if you don't go along with the banking lobby, why they'll run somebody against you in the primary or in your own party or in the general election from the other party and finance him. Well, there's an awful tendency to simply compromise your principles and do what you're told. And that is, of course, enrich the bankers, impoverish the people. Well, Bob, you go right ahead.
Well, you can see the synergy in how things fit together, the underlying banker aristocracy, if you may, and all of those people who are part of it worldwide. We have subscribers from all over the world. And there was just an election in one of the Asian countries. And one of these subscribers wrote and said, hey, we're more advanced towards world government than you are. And, you know, you watch these characters, and they end up doing the same thing that the Western bankers want them to do. And I'm afraid that in the chaos that we are going to probably encounter, that it's going to be us against them. And if they lose, they'll lose permanently, because it'll be a long time before they'll ever be able to come back. Because we should, if we're winners, and we should be, we should strip them of all their assets and incarcerate them. And those people who committed treason should be treated the way treasonous people should be treated. And so I think no matter what they do, I don't think they're going to win. What kind of a price are we going to pay? It could be horrible. But they're not going to win, and this is going to stop for some generations. I mean, that's hard to tell. And we just have to see. But in the meantime, the longer that we get in the time frame, the more people we can tell. And if they come around and say, well, we're going to draft you to go over and fight Iran because they've got 8 million troops in the field and we've only got 1 million. So we need another 7 million pieces of cannon fodder to put in the field. And people are going to be invited to the war, so to speak, and they're going to say, no, we're not going to do that. And then they're going to really have problems. Especially with the military. The military knows, and I'm talking about the regular people in the military, not the Pentagon. And they know exactly what's going on. I do a military program, and I've been driving them crazy for 7 years. And in fact, I even had the Army Times email me and tell me that I shouldn't use information out of the Army Times. I've never quoted anything. And I've never even read it. I mean, even I was in the military, I never read the Army Times. I read the Stars and Stripes, though, but, I mean, it just shows you how desperate these people are. Washington had to have put them up to it. I mean, how else would they know who I was other than my broadcast? And so the military is not going to do what they want them to do, which would be to suppress the public who perhaps didn't want to go to a war. So they're going to be in for lots of surprises.
Well, basically,
and they think
they're going to just say, oh, it's about patriotism, it's about saving America. Ladies and gentlemen, these people don't want to save America. Their loyalty is not to America, but to this internationalist dream. And they're doing everything they can to disrupt and destroy America and everything good and worthwhile and noble in the world. And it's about time that the people understood there is treason today. Well, this is Dr. Stan. I guess is Bob Chapman. Well, Bob, certainly let's talk a little bit about what's going on here in the United States. Certainly, we saw soaring commodity prices, oil prices, gold and silver. Then they sort of backed off here. The gold and silver prices really fell dramatically last week. It's interesting that the price of oil has been falling, but the price of gasoline hasn't been falling. You sort of have to ask yourself, why would the price of oil be falling and the price of gasoline? Well, it's sort of like these headlines we saw this last week, increased number of people working, unemployment rate goes up. Increased number of people working and unemployment rate is going from 8.8 to 9%. You wonder how they're able to calculate all these things. But they will add, ladies and gentlemen, you must understand that figures don't lie, but liars can figure. They're employed by the government to convince you that there's lots of new jobs, things are really getting better, big companies are hiring. And that's why unemployment rates went up from 8.8 to 9% last week. And if you want to question that, well, as the President said, anybody, of course, who doubts what happened on September 11th and that the Al-Qaeda was behind the attack on the World Trade Center needs to have their head examined. That's what he said on CBS just yesterday. And if you don't go along with what the government tells you, if you don't believe everything you're told, obviously you're crazy. Of course, if you believe their story on Pat Tillman, the heroic, of course, fellow gave up a $3 million a year contract to play professional football, to fight for his country in Afghanistan. Why, when he was killed, they even gave him the Silver Star for leading his troops into battle and killed by the enemy. Of course, he was killed by friendly fire with 3 bullets in the center of his forehead. The military doctor who saw it said it was murder, but of course that they lied to us about that. They lied to us about Jessica Lynch. They lied to us about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. 25 years after, 58,000 American boys were killed because of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Why Robert McNamara admitted it didn't take place. And 58,000 Americans died for absolutely nothing. In fact, now we've, of course, rewarded the Vietnamese by giving them most favored nation treaty status. What's this all about? And they've never returned a lot of our boys. And of course, the government high officials know that. We have a number of books on the men we left behind. Probably most of them are dead by now. They were abandoned by Henry Kissinger and the Brotherhood of Darkness and left to die in Vietnam after going off to fight for freedom, to fight for their country. I mean, that is the worst sort of betrayal. Well, Bob, certainly where are we going economically here in America? Certainly because, of course, everything seemed to start falling last week. Oil prices fell, gold and silver fell. The commodity prices were dropping, and now the market's going back up again. What in heaven's name is going on? And incidentally, our number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295 if you have a question for Bob. Go ahead.
Well, several months ago, the stock market started to move up into higher ground, and that higher ground is where it's at now. And people see the economy and they say, well, gee, how can that be? And the reason is that it is in anticipation that there will be QE3 or something like that called something else. And they know. They don't use inside information. They create inside information. So these Wall Street people, they know what's going on. These are the same people who tell the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department what to do. I mean, you've seen the revolving door from Wall Street to Washington, and hasn't stopped one bit. Just look at the backgrounds of hundreds of people who are working in government or telling government what to do. And so we have a higher market because they already know that the system must have somewhere between $1.7 and $3 trillion in this coming year. And if it doesn't, the whole system's going to collapse. They're very well aware of that. And they're prolonging the thing to see where's the best place to plug their war in. And that's really what this is about at this point.
And
but it's coming.
And basically they collapse the price of gold and silver and oil by simply manipulating the commodity market. They told the CFTC, the Commodity Trading Finance Commission, that's Commodity Trading Finance Commission, to put out margin calls. They put out 5 margin calls on silver. I don't know how many they put out on gold, but what they did is they just kept raising the fees and raising the fees. So anybody who was there speculating already lost their shirt. Well, you go right ahead, Bob.
As far as the market's concerned, we had in the commodity market an increase of 5 margin increases, calls of requirements in 9 days. Absolutely unheard of. Never before. We had something like that back in 1980. After the investigation, after everything was over, it was found that 9 of the 23 people on the board of the CFTC were short gold and silver. So that's why they pulled what they pulled then, and they're doing the same thing now. But what's happening now is different in the response of people. I had a mining executive speak with the head of one of the exchanges last week, and he asked the question, well, are you getting a lot of complaints from people about naked shorting and market manipulation? He says, you would think they had call centers. He said, we're getting, and we being the three major exchanges, NYSE, ASE, and NASDAQ, as well as CFTC and SEC, they're getting over 1,000 a day. And that's why I encourage people to write a letter and say, look, I own gold, silver, coins, bullion, and shares, and I'm sick and tired of the U.S. government naked shorting the market and manipulating it. And I want it to stop now. And hopefully that figure will rise to 5,000 a day. And maybe these people will get the message and do something, because if they don't, down the line, everything isn't going to stay the same. And these people are going to have to pay for what they've done to the investors in the commodity markets, which include gold and silver.
And I think it's so important for people to understand this is all manipulated by the banks. I believe in the free enterprise system. I believe in free banking. This isn't free banking. This is all a small group of people working together to take advantage of the masses of people. And this is corporate socialism or corporate fascism, where these small people tell the CFTC to raise the margin requirements to dump the market. Well, this is Dr. Stan. We were just simply saying that the margin calls that were put out certainly at the request of the big banks, held naked short positions. In other words, they were shorting the market illegally. They didn't have the silver that they had already sold, but they were getting slaughtered by the price of silver going up. And to keep from simply losing tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, they got the CFTC to raise the margin requirements to dump the market. And of course, the people who were speculating in the market had nothing to do with sales, supply and demand. It had to do with speculation. And these people certainly were leveraged, and so many of them, I'm sure, lost fortunes in just this last week because the banks told the commodity markets what to do, and they listened to their masters. After all, when you have enough money to buy the president and the legislators, you certainly have enough money to buy the people on the CFTC. Well, before we go on, Bob, we've got several questions from listeners. I want you to tell our listeners how they can go ahead and get a copy of the International Forecaster and subscribe to it, and why they should subscribe to the International Forecaster.
Well, the forecast is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. And we publish by email on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It runs around 40 pages each time. And we have a hard copy for those who are not on the Internet. Anything that you need to know each week is in that publication. You can get a free copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. That's theinternational, FORECASTER.com. Or you can go to www.intforecaster.com. That's intforecaster.com. For those of you who want to ask a question, we answer everyone, or get a copy, or get our latest releases on gold and silver shares, you can email us at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. Bob at intforecaster.com. Or, for those of you who want to call toll-free, that number is 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188. 88.
And of course, it was last week that George Soros announced he was selling his silver and selling his precious metal positions, gold and silver positions. And of course, this helped to precipitate the panic. And I'm sure probably at the bottom he was buying back in again. It's the old technique. Why, of course, you announce what you're doing very loudly. You make a big issue out of selling your position. Other people panic and they sell. And then you buy back again. Old George Soros is so smart. But watch what the really smart people are doing. William Gross of PIMCO, of course, one of the largest hedge funds, he's buying and holding his gold and silver. John Paulson, another major hedge fund owner, they're buying and holding the precious metals because they know, of course, that the whole monetary system is coming down. Well, we've got John, first of all, calling from Spokane, who has a question for Bob. John, go right ahead.
Yes, thanks. I was wondering about something. During ancient times, did anybody write about this phenomenon of central banking in the Bible?
Well, I don't know about in the Bible, but some of the famous works historically that I've read have never gone into this. There's a mention of the economic problems, say, of Rome and Greece. Plutarch, I can't remember him ever talking about this, nor Gibbon in the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. So, in ancient times, I really don't have any strong references going back to Egypt. The information that we have really started around the year 7 and 800 during what is called the Dark Ages, and then it evolved from there. The nobility in Europe, and most of the history that we have is European history. They decided that they would have sort of a central banking system, which was run by the Knights Templar. And later they decided that, no, we don't want them to do that. We want the royal families to do it and the Vatican. And so they eliminated these people. They killed them. And really that, to me, is the beginning of modern banking. And there's not much on the subject previous to the Dark Ages. And during that period of time, up until the 13th century, Europe was really in terrible shape. And they had a great struggle to survive. And then after that, you get the kind of thing that you see today. And so this group of people, and many of the same players go back 1,000 years, families, like the royal families. And so there's plenty of, we'll call it modern precedents over the last 1,000 years that these same characters do the same thing over and over again.
And, of course, basically usury was outlawed in the Bible. Jews were not supposed to charge interest to other Jews. Gentiles were not supposed to charge interest to other Gentiles until really that all began to change with the Gentiles in the early 1600s when Francis Bacon began to say, well, we could produce the prosperity with just a little usury. They called it usury, lending for interest. If it was just reasonable, 2 or 3%, and think, of course, how we could get the economy going and benefit everybody. Francis Bacon was part of this secret society, the Rosicrucians, that came to America about 1640 to take over control of our government, and they are here today, and they're manifest and represented in all of the secret societies. In fact, the Masonry even has a degree on the Rosy Cross. They have another degree on the Templars, but people don't understand how it all fits together and how all the secret societies are working in conjunction with the financiers to bring about this one world government. But remember, Chris, the only time that we ever see any sign of anger on the part of our Lord was when he went into the temple and he overthrew the tables of the money changers for taking advantage of the people. John, I hope that answers your question. And
Yes, thank you.
thank you. Let's go to Mike, who's calling from Coeur d'Alene. Again, our number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Hi, Mike. Do you have a question for Bob?
I do. I'd like to address the gentleman's question prior to this phone call. In the Bible, I believe in the book of Nehemiah, it talks about the usury and the system of debt to where the people couldn't pay for their land. They owned their land, but they couldn't pay for it. They sold their sons and daughters into slavery, and they still couldn't pay for it. Nehemiah got the nobles and the kings and the princes of the area together, and he said, stop this usury. And the whole book of Nehemiah really is a socioeconomic book rather than just focusing on the building of a wall that many pastors use now to placate their congregations into building a bigger church. Anyway, so I just add that for free. The question that I have is, hi, Bob. Debt. I know people that are trying to get out of debt, and I know a particular person in general who wants to take their credit cards and buy physical materials, precious metals, silver and gold bullion, and pay it off with cheaper and cheaper dollars. I'm not so sure that that's the wisest move, but I wanted to know from your history and your experience, what do you think of that as a strategy to leverage yourself into getting into the markets, and not so much the market of trading, but holding the physical, using debt to do it?
And if you'd asked me the question 11 years ago, I would have said no. And probably up until 5 years ago. But we're in the second stage of a bull market in gold and silver. And there's absolutely no question that's what it is. And I believe we have a long way to go. And based upon that, I am not against people borrowing money, particularly like against a 401k or a IRA or that sort of thing where the interest rates are low and you're usually paying money to yourself for the interest. And so I'm not against that because of what the market's like. We've had a lot of people just recently over the last year do that, and I might say invest $50,000 in gold and $50,000 in silver, and their investments are worth considerably more now. And if they want to, they can pay part of what they own, sell it, and pay the loan back if they choose to, and still have money to be able to participate in the market.
Well, that's what one of my friends said.
Every situation is different. It all depends on the people, their knowledge. Do they really want to get involved? Should they? Do they have any understanding of what they're getting into? And so it's a case of suitability. And you have to spend time with people to realize what they're doing. And, I have some people say to me, who are my age, 70, 75, that, look, I want to take those risks. The reason why is, if I'm right, I'm going to have enough money to live on. I'll probably live to be 85 or more. And if I'm not, if I don't have enough, then, I'm a burden on my family. On the other hand, the rewards could be quite great, and they have been so far. And so the general answer is yes, but it's got to be person by person. And you have to have somebody like me who's old, who's gone through all this, and can tell the mental makeup of people the physical background of whether they should do it.
And I think there's another factor, and that's what you brought out, the interest rate that you'd be paying. Suddenly you mentioned credit cards, Mike. We're hearing that Bank of America is talking about increasing some of the credit card interest to 30%. I certainly wouldn't borrow money at 30% to invest in gold and silver.
That's my position. That's the whole thing. You know, I mean, just as Bob had pointed out, they raised margins 7 times in 9 days, which is unprecedented. Who's to say that they wouldn't change the rules in the middle of the game? Look at the Hunt brothers in the late 70s.
This is a whole different ballgame, though. I think Bob is absolutely right. If you can get low interest rates, or you're paying the interest to yourself, as it would be if you're actually borrowing on your 401k. So I think you have to think this whole thing through very, very carefully. And then you want to put yourself into a position where you're going to be worried all the time. But remember, the market is driven by fear and greed. Greed is what gets us into the market, and fear is what gets us to the point we can't sleep at night time. It's nice to be able to sleep at nights, especially when you get to be 80 years old, and not have to worry. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. I think Bob is absolutely right. It's the individual, it's their temperament, it's where you're going to borrow your money. But, of course, there's always a tendency to try to beat the system. And it's very, very difficult to do it. Anything else, Mike?
No, sir. Thank you both very much.
But remember, the interest rate is the key whether you're going to do something like that, okay? That was Mike calling from Coeur d'Alene. If you're out there, our number 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. And well, Bob, it certainly looks to me like we're moving into some very difficult positions. Certainly, the situation in Europe is dire. Suddenly, it looks like we're destabilizing the whole of the Near East and Middle East. And if anybody thinks that these are all just spontaneous uprisings having to do with democracy in Libya and in Syria and in Jordan and in Algeria and Morocco and Egypt and Tunisia, and boy, I'd like to get you to invest in this tunnel we're drilling from San Francisco to Shanghai. You can make a fortune there. Because I'm saying that with tongue-in-cheek. Basically, this whole thing is manipulated and created, and I think Bob's absolutely right, in preparation for a coming war. With, I don't know, it's with the Muslim world, with the Syrians, with the Iranians. I don't know, but it's obvious they're preparing us for a war with the Muslim world. Would you agree with that, Bob?
I think so, and it's going to turn out to be a religious war, in which they've had one after another, century after century, for the past 1,000 years and more. And we saw it even in Egypt, but unfortunately we couldn't answer in historical detail whether the situation was the same economically and financially then, because we don't have the historical records. In fact, most of the records of that time were burned when they had a fire at the library in Alexandria, Egypt. I forget the year, but most everything was destroyed. And how that happened, I don't know. But it just shows you how little information like that we have. But anyway, we do know that this sort of thing has gone on for a long time. And that allows people like you and I, Stan, to study and back into what these people might do in the future. And usually it's fairly close to what they did in the past.
Amen to that.
And that's how we were able to predict wars.
Well, let's go into Alberto, who's calling us from New York City. Hi, Alberto. Do you have a quick question for Bob?
Yes, I do. I assume I don't have a lot of time to hear the music.
That's all right. We have a little time.
Okay.
You just ask your question.
Okay.
We'll try to get the answer for you.
My question's related more to personal strategy. I'm a 35-year-old single male. I don't have a lot of ties. I live in New York City, but I'm planning to move soon. I have a chunk of money. I've worked in publishing. I don't want to pursue that field anymore. I don't believe in it. But I want to protect myself, and I want to figure out if I should, what my strategy should be, whether to, sort of live more self-sufficiently or leave the country. And I just wanted
hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Okay, Alberto, go right ahead.
Yes. So I guess from your perspective, both being elder statesmen to me, I just would like to know what your advice would be in terms of what kind of life is like to live a more natural life. But should I leave the country? Should I invest my money in gold? Should I invest in property or in some land or So I'd just like you to sort of respond to that.
Bob, how would you respond to Alberto? He's 35. He's got a fair amount of money, a fairly good, substantial amount of money, which he's made. He does want to continue doing publishing. What should he do? Are you married, Alberto?
No, I'm single, and I have family, but not in New York City, and I don't think New York City is the place I want to stay.
I would think at this time I would get out of New York City as fast as I could. Well, let's get.
Yes, go ahead.
Bob, what would you say?
Well, you've seen the movie Escape from New York City, I'm sure. I lived there at one time, and so I'm very familiar with it. And living in another place is not for everybody. Countries have rules that you just can't go there, even if you got a visa to do so, and live in the country. And you just can't go and work there. You have to get permission, or you have to start a business. And where you have money, if you wanted to start a business or get into a business with an established company by buying into it, that would be a way to do that. Usually most countries, you can live there for 5 or more years, and you qualify to become a citizen nominally. And so that's an option that's open, especially to people like yourself who are young and don't have any encumbrances, we'll call them.
But should he invest at least part of his money in gold and silver?
Oh, I think he was going to, no matter where you're going to go, your money should be in gold and silver, coins or bullion or shares. And if you're going to go to another country, you have to find out what the rules are. Now, can you bring gold and silver bullion there? Do they have exchanges where you can buy and sell gold and silver stocks? And every country is different. So first you have to determine where to go. And you would do that by Googling an area and talking to the consulate, and then going and visiting that area, perhaps talking to businessmen and other people who live in that area.
Hold that thought here. Well, this is Dr. Stan. We had Alberto calling from New York City. He was asking for some advice about relocating, and Bob was just telling him it's a lot to look into if you're thinking of relocating to another country. Alberto, there are lots of places in America that will probably be fairly safe, but I would certainly get out of New York City. I would get into gold and silver. I would be more interested not in having maybe a small piece of property, but I sure wouldn't put a lot of money into property now, because I think the prices are going to fall in most parts of the country. Hey, we're out of time. Okay. I want to thank you so very much for calling, and Bob Chapman. Bye-bye. Bob Chapman, I want to thank you as always. Our guest has been Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, a fountain of knowledge. God bless, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Yes, and thank you all for listening.
Bye-bye. Okay, fine.